Hello, my name is Carol Menkiti, and I have the honor of welcoming you all here tonight to this wonderful place. My husband, Ifani Menkiti, bought the store 15 years ago. He loved this place, and he died 3 years ago, and me and my 4 children have inherited it and love it. So we feel it's a very, very special place, over 95 years old. And for the longest time was the only all poetry store in the nation, maybe even in the world for all we know. But thank you for coming tonight, and you're guaranteed a good reading, I'm sure. And welcome to the people on Zoom. There's 20 people on Zoom tonight, so. Thank you for being here.
Hi, my name is Naima. I have the pleasure of introducing the poets Moira Linehan, Chloe Martinez, and Oscar Oswald. So Moira Linehan will be reading from her 2 collections published in 2020, Toward from Slant Books and Company from Madres Press. She has 2 earlier collections published by Southern Illinois University Press, If No Moon 2007, which won the Crab Orchard series in Poetry Open Competition, and Incarnate Grace 2015. A Connecticut native, Linehan has lived her adult life in the greater Boston area. Chloe Martinez is a poet and scholar of South Asian religions. She is the author of the collection 10,000 Selves, The Word Works 2021, and the chapbook Corner Shrine, Backbone Press 2020. Her work has appeared in Poetry, Ploughshares, Prairie Schooner, TriQuarterly, and elsewhere. She lives in Claremont, California with her husband and 2 daughters, and works at Claremont McKenna College. Oscar Oswald is the author of Iridenta, published by Nightboat Books in 2021. This debut collection engages the pastoral tradition in the landscapes of the Mojave and New Mexico, exploring a poetics of wilderness through the occupied West. A complimentary essay on pastoral poetry in the language of wilderness was published on LitHub last fall. Poems have appeared in Black Box Manifold, New England Review, Volt, Seneca Review, and Fence, among other outlets. Oscar has a PhD in English and Creative Writing from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and he has served as the poetry editor for Witness and as an assistant editor for Noemi Press. He teaches at the University of Idaho. So thanks so much. One last note is we just ask that you please silence your cell phones and wear your mask for the duration of the reading. Thanks so much.
Hello, and thank you for being here. Thank you to the Grolier for all of you involved with organizing this and for all the publicity that you've given to us. It's my pleasure to read tonight with Chloe and with Oscar. I'm going to begin with a couple of poems from my collection, Toward. As the cover suggests, many of these poems are set in Ireland. The first one that I'm going to read, It Will Never Get Any Better, is set at the Tyrone Guthrie Center, which is a place where I had a residency. After dinner one night, one of the other writers began the story at the start of this poem. It will never get any better. 4 years they did not come out of their cottages, she says. Women, the new Ireland lured from Africa. Every day, wind and rain, if not from one side, then the other. If not downpours, at least mist, and some of that heavy. No telling when in the day the clouds would open. One storm passed through another, waiting for weather they knew. Another always on the way, keeping them in. They were waiting for weather they knew. Not Connemara skies, perpetual raw gray. Like them, I've had to learn it will never get any better. You have to dress in layers, 2 at least, then rain gear over that. Otherwise, you won't ever go out. Maybe a bit of an exaggeration, the 4 years, she said, but I've been here 4 days now and it's not gotten any better. Rain, dark clouds keep moving across. This morning it was snowing. Yesterday I got caught in hail. I'd started in sun, though I was dressed for hail, and hail it did on my way back. The turn in these skies, that swift, that dramatic. Mind you, daffodils are in bloom along every path. I walk the lanes curving and narrow around this place. Maybe a car or two will pass in the hour I'm out. I've learned they won't stop, won't yield right of way. I've had to go down into the ditch to let them pass. And this next poem was inspired by that poem. The same setting, it's still March. But let me come back in September. Let me come back in September when summer is still in the landscape and autumn's making only the briefest of forays, in at dawn, then gone till twilight. Nights, I will already need a comforter for my bed, but just a light jacket during the day when I walk the wooded path out to the lane. The path will be dry, the trees still leafed out. I long to be walking a lane in September toward the distant hills, their overlapping rises stretching along under clear skies. For 2 weeks, March weather, wind carried rain, at times horizontal, at times turned to sleet, has kept me tethered here. Those distant hills far too far when I walk these days, always looking over my shoulder at the ever approaching rain-fraught clouds. I long not to worry how much time I have before they arrive. In September, holly and ivy will twine through the hedges above those ditches. I won't need this rain gear or waterproof boots. Let me come back to walk in September in each day's warm hours, arms and legs in sync with long pulls of breath, opening wide my lungs, pressing me on toward those hills. What lies beyond? Likely more of them, as green and boggy, singular trees stranded atop their rolling crests. In September, the lake will still be brimming with fish. Every hawk will have its fill. Oh, let me come back. Let me say it was so. You know, that's a foolish woman speaking. The other book that I had come out was this one in And Company. It's a biography of sorts in poems about my mother's mother, my grandmother. Her name, Marie Louise Rambeau Washer. She was born in the town of Angers, which is about 165 miles west, southwest of Paris. I know she became a dressmaker at the end of the 1800s in Paris. I know she met my grandfather there, and they eventually emigrated to Boston. So I begin with this poem, Getting My Grandmother to Paris. It's a long poem, so I'm only going to read you a few lines to set this story. If it's just a few dates I have of her life, and most of them only the year, how do I tell my grandmother's story except by invention? Nearly every line there for the creating. Before I set her on that train to Paris, though, I'll picture her poring over ads in Le Figaro, not just dreaming her future as dressmaker in Paris, designing it. And so, because I knew so little about my grandmother, I decided I would turn to paintings by French Impressionists and American Impressionists at the time when she would have been doing her work. And so I began really by doing research first. But the problem was that the research started to make me feel very hemmed in, very closed in, very confined, as I learned about the customs of women in those times. And so I created a form for this poem where at the end of the line where you think maybe at last this woman can have some freedom, but then the last word of the line becomes the first word of the next line. And so there's not a lot of space to travel. And I hope you'll hear that repetition now. And the title of this poem is Before Bert Morisot and Mary Cassatt, meaning before these two women became artists, what was it like to be a woman artist? Fugitive, the materials of their art made quickly in small notebooks on wove paper that goods might have been wrapped in pencil sketch, sometimes pastel, a wash of watercolors, colorful little pieces of the confines of home where they made their art. Never alone, sisters-in-law, female cousins ever close by sofa, tea table, garden bench, no farther. Far from boulevard, cafe, studio, the off limits, limited every aspect of their lives. Mirrored rules for stepping out to dine, to dance, be seen. Scenes men painted in oils on large canvases, framework for the holding pattern till they married. Marriage, or at least the arrival of children, the ending their art gone fugitive. And so as I was doing my research, I realized I made a terrible mistake in that first poem about getting my grandmother to Paris. So I rewrite it, and here's take two. Just get her onto that train to Paris, I thought, and her story would take off. I, who know so little about her, little more than the places she lived, Angers, Paris, then Boston. I'd already made her dreamer and dressmaker, drawn to the art of being noticed, making an impression. I thought her ready to step into the midst of La Belle Époque, where she could design, sew, embellish any dress. Clothes do not make the woman, though at that time, as always, Paris, the exception. I myself had put her on a train to that city, but only in retrospect do I see she can't yet arrive. She can't yet step into those streets. How many stories had I read of disreputable women who'd walked there alone? Yet I'd let her leave without an aunt to meet her, an address to receive her. I'd never imagined how soon a story can go off its rails. There's an ampersand for the and company part in the title of this collection, and so I have a poem, Ampersand. And by this point in the collection, my grandparents have emigrated to Boston. They're living in Jamaica Plain. They have set up business on Boylston Street near the Boston Public Library. The name of their place, Jules Washer, my grandfather's name, and Company. And so this is a collection where I'm trying to find out who and Company really is. Around, even at the time of the famous eruption of Vesuvius, an ampersand on a wall that survived, scribes writing in cursive, the custom of fusing letters, in this case, E and T for and, using shortcuts, even in those times, to save time, save parchment, or maybe just to feel the flourish of those letters' tails trailing through and out their fingers. Such a feminine symbol, my friend Mary said. And right away, I see what a corset did to women's waists. Or for another variation on this theme, two letters like that termed a ligature. So for my grandmother, she too bound in marriage, bound in business to Jules Washer. She, the and Company in Jules Washer and Company. She put in writing as the never named. As in some luxurious ampersands, the E and T barely are distinct, if at all. Who was she? I, no seamstress, to this day unable to close the distance between us. And I'm going to close with a poem that's based on two paintings that I saw at the National Gallery in DC. One by Bert Morisot, the mother and sister of the artist, and the other by Mary Cassatt, Woman with a Fan. This begins in a studio apartment that I rented there. This room, with its view of construction cranes and hollow buildings on the rise in DC above dust and debris, blocked off sidewalks, and the grand grind of dump trucks starting up when the light goes green and 4 lanes of traffic must merge to 3. I'm just 3 metro stops to the museum where I'll find the women Morisot and Cassatt painted in rooms of their own. Outside the rooms Morisot and Cassatt painted, Paris was one grand construction site. The slums along the Seine being raised, the destitute pushed back to the city's new far edges. The emptied space becoming sun-filled parks and promenades as the city went on fine display. While inside rooms of their own, women preserved life as they'd always known it. Private, confined. Mirrors repeat those private, confined lives. Here, Morisot's sister back home for her confinement, as they would have said, her loose, pale yellow robe slightly belling around her swelling belly, reflected, though just barely, in the mirror she waits beneath. Cassatt's mirror, 10 years after this Morisot, distinctly shows the back of her young woman's head and shoulders, while in her hands, a large gold fan, open wide, obscures her waistline, bust line. Taking measure of the waistlines, bust lines of the women who came to her, not stopping there though, taking note of those she passed on pathways in the Bois de Boulogne, the Boston Gardens, my grandmother endlessly undressing women to understand the construction of their clothes, how bones and stays, darts and tucks best display each one. I should have known if I got too close, she'd undress me. I'd never thought about getting too close. After all, my plan had been just to look at paintings, women's in dresses she could have fashioned, so I could piece together a grandmother I'd barely known. I found her life a story of assemblage, watched how she could never stop taking a woman's measure. As she steps forward to take mine now, so naturally have we switched places. I wonder who's been the subject all along. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Can make sure this is close to where I'm speaking. Hi, it's so good to be here. Thanks so much to James and everybody at Grolier for hosting us. Moira, so wonderful to hear your reading. Oscar, I'm looking forward to yours. Okay, so just a tiny bit lower. Okay. I'm going to read a couple poems from my collection, 10,000 Selves. It's my first book. I don't know if you can see from there, but the cover is a horse made of women. And it's kind of about, it's about gender, but it's also about multiplicity and messiness and the kind of many different selves that we inhabit. So the first poem is the source for that title, and I'm going to read that one first. It's called The Mirror Room. A bunch of these poems are also about India. I am a poet, but I'm also a scholar of South Asia. And while I was doing my PhD, I spent a lot of time in India. So some of these poems are about that. This is one of them. The Mirror Room, Mehrangarh Fort, Jodhpur, Rajasthan. You live in a high fort above a blue city. The rooftops below speckled with laundry. At night, the distant echoes of 100 brass bands, 100 weddings. The blue of the city is not quite robin's egg, not exactly the blue of chicory. Outside the city is a desert. Don't tell it like a story. It will sound too beautiful. You stand on a high parapet in the rustle and coo of pigeons under filigreed eaves. When you step over red velvet ropes leaving the museum behind, you find rooms empty as the moon, floors carpeted in desert silt. In one bedchamber turned cave, you hold your breath, you bow before a rank hill of bat guano, you touch niches for the ghosts of little lamps, and frescoed girls dance with gods along the wall. Plaster dusts your fingertips, stained glass windows turn your thin skin rainbow. You take a photo of a white hallway. Mughal arches echo, fade into light, not a story, not an image, it is a map. At the end of the hallway, a balcony, the ground hazily distant, the wide-winged turkey vultures gliding so close, hold tight to the railing. Notice how soft the sandstone carved into curling vines. Notice it is crumbling. Meringar means sun citadel. Sheesh Mahal means mirror palace or else hall of mirrors, but it is just a tiny space, dim, claustrophobic with reflections, wild, intimate room. It wants an audience. Here you are, alone with your 10,000 selves. Moira read some really lovely ekphrastic poems based on paintings. So I thought I would read one of those too, that I haven't read in a while. This one is based on a 16th century engraving that's in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And the poem takes its title from the painting, the engraving. Durer's St. Jerome in his study. Translator hunched, haloed, slant of light, bottle glass windows lining the casements with little sun targets and a skull beneath them, and Christ tiny on his desktop cross, and along the back wall, each thing in its place. Scissors, sun hat, time in the hourglass, rosary on a hook, and one enormous gourd suspended on a rope from the ceiling, calligraphy of drying vines. The lion and dog repose in the foreground. The trestles of his work table etched in all their specific solidity, their shadows at rest on the floor. His face bowed, of course, over the book. A man obsessed. Expert ascetic, patron saint of translators. He took the thorn from the lion's paw. His piece made by violence, 1,000 minuscule canyons cut into a copper plate. Jerome at his work feels not the weight of our eyes upon him. He is looking for the right word. His name means sacred name. He had a wicked temper, relocated late in life to a spelunk or cave, but Durer gave him instead this wood-beamed, sunlit, quiet room. Sacred, cognate with sacrifice, room with rural, Rome, and also ragged, ruin. A setting apart, also a desecration. An open space runs to desert. Behind him, the silent progress of sun and shadow on the wall. The dog dreaming smiles in his sleep, and the lion stretches his tender paw. I'm gonna read a California poem. I'm from here, actually. I'm from New Bedford, Massachusetts, about an hour from here, and I'm back here visiting family. Some of them are here today, which is wonderful, and on Zoom. But I've been living in California for a couple of years. This is a poem that was written kind of like during the Trump presidency, but thinking back to the moment before, I guess is what I want to say. And I feel like reading it today after watching the news. The new mother before the end times, California. After the rain, how good it is to walk out and feel the sun on your shoulders, the baby in her stroller, chattering in protest, then asleep. The gray-green olive trees shine wetly. The silver-gray eucalyptus trees are a scent you walk through on Mills Avenue, carrying with you the knowledge that around the corner is a tree with 100 figs just beginning to ripen. How good to be somewhere still new to you, to crunch fried sardines at the Filipino supermarket on a good day, a day when you did not say that terrible thing to your sister, when you did not stand where a great sharp palm frond fell with a crash, when you did not show up late for your own public talk. You have hung the hammock that you bought in Mexico 10 years ago, the one you've been carrying in a box from one rented apartment to the next, from state to state to state. You have taken it from the box and thrown the box away and hung the hammock up with some strange bright orange nylon tie-down straps you found at the hardware store, and it looks pretty stupid, honestly. But when you lie in it, you can still see the insanely blue sky and the edge of that fig tree. It is not yet that time when you will be afraid to let your husband, a citizen, leave the country. When irrational fears will become reasonable ones, you haven't yet begun to consider the risks and benefits of certain ordinary acts, certain statements. The baby's teeth not yet emerged from her gums, the air sweet on your two bodies. Today you think briefly that you might be just the person to give yourself advice on how to live, though you are underqualified at best, and at worst, you might be giving yourself some kind of carpal tunnel, holding the baby at that odd angle all the time, clutching at something else with your free hand. I'm going to read one more from this book, and then I'm just going to read two new poems, and that will be it from me. This is a poem in which I was inspired by a random thing I read online, a customer review of a bra. And I was also thinking about what we mean when we talk about God and religion. I'm a scholar of religion as well as a poet, so that's on my mind a lot. I'll leave it at that. The inspiring quote is this customer review of the Uniqlo Beauty Light bra for $19.99. It has a God structure. I think it will resist a long time. The God structure. Oh, keep me up, keep me going, keep it together. Smooth me, reduce excess movement. There is a heaviness. There is around me a God structure. It helps me organize my thoughts. It has laid out plans, I think, for various eventualities. And the existence of plans, though they change, is a comfort. This morning, the God structure led me to a vine that was drooping over the far edge of the front lawn, covered with ripe blackberries. God structure said, eat them, and I did. The stain of them still on my hands when I heard that the God structure had also made a disease that is suddenly taking from my friend his body, among other things. It seems the God structure doesn't give a shit, has no alternate plan. Keep Googling it, nothing appears. His tongue tries to choke him in his sleep. His God structure is written into his code. It was always there, in silence, inevitable. Whatever has a God structure is real, is irresistible. It's tiny, ticking bricks, its termite-riddled beams, picturesque and stupid, and also vast avenues that shape the light, and the sea that makes us go on somehow after we look at it, and also flying buttresses that carry that weight, moving it outward until it becomes bearable. The God structure has no need of metal underwire. It lifts with mere stitches and foam. Beauty light, it won't hoist me too high, will it? God structure, maybe you don't listen, but if by chance you do, I could use just enough support to keep my tired breast in its hapless place, awaiting plans, awaiting some revelation. We speak on the phone, my friend's murderous tongue and me. We say at the end of the conversation, I'll let you go. The God structure has written us this script. We read it aloud. We hope to resist a long time. I wanted to read just two new poems. In the last year, I've been writing these poems that are kind of about art, but they're really about museums and how we experience art when we are out in the world together. Something I was thinking about because I couldn't be out in the world and couldn't go to a museum and was mostly looking at art online and remembering the museums that I loved. My parents are both artists, so I grew up wandering around museums and looking at art and feeling like that was an extension of home for me. So I'm going to read just two of those, or two poems that are maybe intersecting with these ideas, I guess. And this one is about the very famous painting of Velázquez, Las Meninas, which is a giant portrait. And I should say a key thing about this big painting, which is it's a portrait of multiple people. It's a royal portrait. It has a child princess at the center. You've probably seen it. It also has some attendants who are dwarfs who have recently been identified and have, we're beginning to have histories for these people who were treated as very marginal characters for a long time. So the name of one of those, Maria Barbala, appears in this poem, and that's who I'm talking about when you hear that name. At the Prado, age 18. When I finally got there, let's say it didn't matter that on the way over, I was crossing the street and a woman offered me flowers and I didn't buy, and she hit me with them, shouting, and the light changed and I fled. Didn't matter whether Madrid felt cold and severe and rainy or cold and magnificent and rainy. Made no difference even that on New Year's Eve, I lost track of my friends and wandered the rain-slicked streets alone because I was uninterested in a stranger's hands on me. Call me a prude, whatever. That's how I felt that night. Let's say when I finally got there, the only thing that mattered was Velasquez peering out from behind the easel in the background, showing me light and breath and cruelty. The Infanta, a skinny little kid, strapped into her dress like the tent pole in a circus tent, and beside her, bristling, alive, two girls, unusually small, often called dwarfs. One looked out with the fierce, elegant face of a person who sees everything, surrounded by people who don't notice much, who move destroyingly through their little world. There is still the interior life, Maria Barbala said to me in the echoing gallery, and there was white light all over her immaculate dress. And this is the last poem I'm going to read. It's a kind of brand new one. So thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. Thanks for coming out in the sweltering heat today. This poem also contains something I should note ahead of time. It's in italics in the poem, but you can't read italics. So I want to say there's a quote in the middle of the poem from the great poet Larry Levis. It's identified as such, but just so you catch it, and I don't take any credit for Levis's words. The quote is, "If death is an adolescent closing his eyes to the music on the radio of that passing car, I think he does not know his own strength." So I'll read that part in the middle of the poem. That'll be Levis speaking. Threshold. Every year in Utah, the belly of a plane opens and out fly thousands of fish. They come out in a mist cloud, their fish bodies flapping and fluttering down, silver, then slipping into a mountain pond. The fish are small. They drift through the air, briefly more leaf than creature, and are thus delivered back to water unharmed. Can it be? Yes. A fish may sometimes be as a leaf, and I sometimes am as a fish, swimming thoughtless in the everyday water of my life pool, then out in the wind of some new thing. My children arrive home sweaty, and my little one puts her feet on me, and immediately I begin to stink. Or I've driven an hour to meet up with a new friend at the Getty, and there, never noticed before, is a trompe-l'oeil letter rack on the back of a Renaissance scene of a Venice canal, so that when you circle the painted piece of wood, you're in a boat. You're unfolding paper to read news from a loved one. You're in a boat again. Or today, when I read Larry Levis's poem Adolescence and was flung out of the plane into grief again, my three lost grandparents, one I never knew, one I never really knew, one beloved taken too soon, and two women I knew in college but not well enough, and my friend Michael, who I knew very well, who I disagreed with more often than not, who accepted me whole, always, gone, now nearly a year. And Levis writes, if death is an adolescent closing his eyes to the music on the radio of that passing car, I think he does not know his own strength. And the wind takes me out, hurls me breathless through unfamiliar air, the green smudge of passing trees. Can fish see it? And he is with me, another fish in the air for maybe 7 seconds before we enter the water again, as we must according to the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources. So a man might stand at the edge of a lake in the mountains all day with a thermos of something hot and a translucent line going out. Eventually he'll catch us too. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Oh. Hi, okay. I'm on the mic. Thank you, Moira. Thank you, Chloe. Thank you for all coming here. It's been wonderful to be in the space, be surrounded by these books. It's sort of imposing to literally just have like all of your heroes just sort of staring at you from the bookshelves. But yeah, I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for hosting this, everybody, and for showing up. So I'm Oscar. I'm going for my book, Irredenta. And the book is sort of a pastoral thing. It's my kind of engagement with pastoral poetry, pastoral poetics. I was drawn to the pastoral because it's sort of a political genre. It's one that sort of poses a question about the stability of a community, the stability of a nation. I was living in Las Vegas when I wrote it. I was living in Las Vegas when Trump announced his run for the presidency on his like golden escalator. That was not very far from where I lived. And that really got me thinking about how I could kind of respond to that. So the name of the book, Irredenta, refers to sort of an Italian term for when one community decides to sort of take another's land and they make a claim to it. I used to say, like, look at what Russia's doing in Crimea. Obviously, stakes a little bit different now, but maybe that's one kind of way to think about this. Kind of a very suspect claim. But yeah, I want to kind of start from reading from this book by reading some of the poems that are really kind of dealing with what I was seeing as sort of a pastoral philosophy. You know, pastoral has a sort of rural and urban divide. That's what I was always kind of thinking about. These sort of farmers with their sheep out in the fields, and this very idyllic world written by urbanites who want to avoid the sort of urban, they sort of romanticize that sort of environment. And so inhabiting the pastoral is in part responding to that sort of romantic idea of what pastoral can be when we kind of use pastoral in the pejorative. So what I was excited about this book is you can kind of inhabit a pastoral persona. You don't have to give it, you don't have to kind of fall in love with it, you don't have to reject it. It sort of gave me a space to write about sort of the American project. So yeah, here's the first poem, kind of announcing a pastoral philosophy, which the book sort of follows through with. It's called Bacchus to Amaryllis, which is sort of very common sort of pastoral conceit. You have Bacchus, who's in love with this woman Amaryllis, sees her everywhere, and can't stop writing about her. That might not make very much sense with where the poem goes. But anyway, here we go. Once it begins, the score is obvious. White vines with wildflowers spring along the fence, our center. Syntax folds. The ballot shrinks into a coin and flips. The dews suspend us and we kiss ourselves and cannot touch our noses. I love listening. What awful noise that is the bride's a bride, where we are minor, swift. I also wanted to jump in this other one that's also sort of playing with, pastoral poetics. And a lot of these poems are linked by sound. That's kind of how I've always written, is by the ear. This one goes. Free thought, with all the sky's direction, mine uprose, untitled, the entire prospect of interrogations, lost on me, American, enveloper by nature, whether nature be big sky, uncitizens, steep man, amends, or is entire. I moves empty, light or birthright, mine, whatever drone, in settlement, I blow my reed. Yeah, so a lot of the pastoral service is announcing a poetics or philosophy. And so a lot of these have this sort of almost like I was thinking about like American oratory, that someone could give a speech somewhere with this sort of pastoral philosophy. This is sort of almost a pastoral speech that I wrote in the book. Direct me leave abroad what is not here, rainwater, and in range the more available, the further my circumference is wrong-footed. Puddles, untethered leaves, who then I am, that ends the scene adrift from my apartment. I speak no civil hex. I carry bear grass in my pocket, aspen in my earshot, to what furthest I can stray. No statesman, I tune up my pipe with grease and gasoline. Being without center, who goes elsewhere, is the same. Freshwater thunderstorm, outstanding rain. As I touch timber, touch my hand. Will this interior be spoken? Walk to wood, fair weather citizen. Stand upstream, headwater absentee. Stem of my name, capital, and juniper, my lifeblood, period. I take what's fair that I am hereby an elector? Or does the audience prefer their lipstick, applauded lavender? What prose is their artillery drape over me? More drum taps, coroner. Applause the aspen leaf, strawberry scale me. What is a people but a sequel? They invite me, yet buried in the moss, I stay them secondhand. Like I would join that pattern or still water, walk away in plainest light. Today my person is a go with humming stilts and wobble gait, who combs the timberline, there loves the birds who talon me. Employer of the chalk line, onlooker, concluder, please tell me, keynote speaker, which megaphone who greets me as my lover, blind to anyone I speak, a void finale, strikes my limbs, nothing in pain, corroding ever after, foreigner. Who isn't here to wonder, what steep man am I, who suits your power? I mind the apple seed, I mute myself. The redwood speaking stands inside my uniform, disrobed from me, state motto, speaking prose that ends with listening. What's happening is the approval. The decoy is that woman crushed aluminum, which man first said, my question, may I unfold consensus of my body? This next poem is the only poem in here that I actually just called the pastoral or an eclogue. And the pastoral is a really old genre. Virgil wrote eclogues. The poet Theocritus wrote kind of invented, if you will, pastoral poetry. And so you're always kind of dealing with these different sort of pastoral figures like Bautis to Amaryllis. A lot of different poets have done that. Milton has his pastoral poem, and they go on and on and on. And they're always kind of interesting how it shifts and where that author's blind spots are and how they're kind of trying to respond to the politics around them, and then often the horrible sort of assumptions they're making about their own world. Yeah, and this one just kind of felt like my own sort of take on that heritage from my desert home. It's just called Pastoral. Tear down my cactus that I fell a child. Wave my name, thin stream, no thicker than my hand. Who splits the stone? I, as the crow flies with the dragonfly. Who hears that I am by their whirligig uncivilized? Crow dawdles, dragonfly, and curtain pulses too besides my window pane from officers removed. That is great cinema. Nor do I trim in stable citizens or bees upripping roots unpublished. Being without center, who goes elsewhere is the same. Their elbow rests upon the balcony and drops a cigarette. That is my hand, that I roll up my sleeves over aluminum. Is there a senator this far from their front door who sings to justice, keep thy eardrums at this hour? So a lot of the book is kind of making this pastoral proposal, and the middle of it is just sort of like a road trip through the West, from New Mexico. I was living in Las Vegas, living in Idaho right now. And I just thought I'd read two of those poems. Yeah, because the pastoral is also, the sort of idea about this urban and rural relationship, which in itself is a very complicated dichotomy to make. And so a lot of the poetry that I'm interested in that regard is sort of unpacking that. Is there really a dichotomy there? Are those things as separate as they seem? I'm thinking about nature iconography in that regard as the romanticized nature. This is an entitled poem, page 23. Just west of Taos, drive the mountain, name the thing wisteria, which I have never seen within a place I made, but after nature now, if I believe my ears are ringing, I wake up with hollow eggs inside a saguaro trunk, and my life as it were thick with water. Turn my wrist to sage and more, Wisconsin forest, touch of death, and Tropicana where I walk. Just say I'm passing through, the pigeons die almost every time. The bobcat hunts for food. I see it scat on the narrow trail. And this one is called Gallup, New Mexico, I-25. I used to drive that road from New Mexico to Las Vegas all the time. And there's a town there called Thoreau, pronounced Thoreau. And that really got me for this poem. Yeah. Piedmont caked with rain, the clod and pebble, reddest bluff in town, real town through his angel lips and journal world. Which exit is Theocritus? Which is it now? The rubber oak or great democracy, the Ocotillo or peyote sound? Continue here. That is the resident democracy who bends the spoon and blows a creek to dry. I weigh myself as citizen or spirit. I am the substance of both. A river's floating light, I float to bottom, newborn leaf, pale red and weightless branch in my neighbor's hand, the candle lighting. If I tumble down one song from resurrection, a man walks up his steps to mine, or eats the dung, his honest song. And leaping at my heels, a country boy in creosote, include the world, withstand it how? If I have only water, finishing with every leaf is laid upon the dusty ground, rescue nothing. I've written of a song. And we've had a lot of poems about like art and museums. And so I wasn't going to read this one, but I wrote this one after going to a museum in London, the British Museum, and seeing these incredible paintings, I think from like the 1400s to the 1600s, depicting religious figures. Yeah, this is my poem, kind of about a museum experience. Maybe went from the artwork itself to the museum to the, I don't know, the abstract part of that whole thing. London afterwards. The blade before its time, the blade on time. St. Michael rules the picture. Shaft, my light, Mojave dust. My shadow, dust, a dime. The Hoover Dam, last bows and limbs, last gleaming, mine. Mount Hood, fly south forever. Time must be the lowest note. Must I become divine? Okay, I'm just going to finish up with two more poems here. Part of the pastoral tradition is also kind of honoring, but also celebrating other pastoral poets. What's so great about like Theocritus, who writes this poem in ancient Greece, is even the first poem is talking about how poetry used to be better before that. You know, it's so what's great about the pastoral is you kind of are expected in the kind of pastoral genre in one sense, my interpretation of it, to sort of pick up the pastoral song again. It's gone away and we have to do it again. You know, and that's also, it's a great kind of idea that you got to start poetry over again, but it's also kind of a bullshit one, you know, because there's a lot of great poetry in the world anyway. And so, but anyway, I wanted to write these poems to some of my teachers, if you will. So this one's to Claudia Keelan. If you're out there, Claudia, on the interwebs, in Las Vegas, maybe. And it's kind of an erasure, if you can see it here. It's all over the page. There's another one over here. This one to my teacher, Claudia. Stranger, leaf astray of all desire for the liquidated soul. Fellow author in the customary, resist this way across the page. Green lending eye is in between. And I'll end with this final poem here called Inscription or Epitaph. You may have noticed there's a lot of lines that get repeated throughout this book, and I kind of gave myself like mantras to use. Being without center, who goes elsewhere is the same as one of them, because that really kind of spoke to maybe kind of how I was feeling about the United States circa Trump's run and presidency. And in one sense, sort of, you know, if you forget the past, you're doomed to repeat it. That one's in this line. Sorry, that one's in this this poem as well. There's other ones that are in there. You have to find them like a Where's Waldo game. But this one's the final poem in the book called Inscription or Epitaph. I am the silhouette, the same as no one, the example of the cloud. I am the same who will be after death, a pond blown over, be blown back to rest, a pond to kiss my feet. So sure is west, however strict the terms may be, forever slipping east. Behold, a sparrow lives with me, a blunt true mover out of hand. Unlanguaged here, a post I stand, the same subject continued, poem, laughing, stand beyond the God. Is English grazing the uncredited, a politics, a withered poetry. I pick people off the ground. I citizened the boy, grew taller than his statue, who uniforms the child with the man. They are idle from my listening. Rescue nothing. I have written of a song. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us. Let's give the poets another round of applause. Books for sale. Poets will be signing books. Thank you all for coming. If you could all help move the chairs against the wall. That'd be great.